Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Fallen London. Today we're going to be carrying on with the exceptional story, Flame, Lead, Clay, Glass. Down in the Correspondent's under Clay workshop, things are in motion. A team of unfinished men and women are packing his equipment into boxes and preparing to move it out. "A risk for us to be seen above," says one. "But we will stand by him." The Clay Correspondent fusses with his tie. Considering the general state of his outfit, the tie hardly matters. "Have you learned something?" he says. "Do you know where the correction will strike next?" Well, we can either explain that he is being hunted. The correction hunts the Clay Correspondent and his works. It will find him and strike somewhere significant to him. Or we can confront him with the truth. The Clay Correspondent was less than honest with you. Telling you the whole story would have made this affair much simpler. Let's confront him. "I know. I'm sorry," he sighs. "The correction hunts me and anything that bears my touch. I suspected as much, but was not willing to accept it. In that, your investigations have served a real purpose, though I can only ask you to forgive me for putting you through it. We knew the risks of my creation. We should have taken them more seriously. I'm going to make it right for everyone. The correction draws closer with each manifestation. It's only a matter of time before it finds me here. I will not allow that." He clears the last of his equipment from his work table. "There is a place out in the marshes where I was reborn. It resonates strongly still. That will be the place we finally bring this sorry affair to a close." He shakes his head. "The engineer will try to stop me. He is, as always, a fool." But there's no venom in the words. So we can either ask what he intends. He speaks with a great deal of finality. Can he really destroy the correction? Or we can challenge him on his feelings. The correspondent did not want to accept the truth of the correction. The same might be said of his feelings for the engineer. "No," he says sharply. "We had our time. Our paths diverged, and there's nothing more to be done about that." But there have always been people who refuse to stick to their assigned paths, who trapeze over muddy grass of life with reckless abandon. The correspondent of all people should know that. His expression is hard. Tell that to him. He would choose ascension no matter the cost, no matter what he'd have to give up. Right, let's ask what he intends. It is not a creature of flesh, blood, or clay. It is raw energy and will. Energy can be redirected. Will can be broken. He looks at the unfinished, gathering his supplies. "Sometimes. But it may not be necessary. It seeks to destroy me because I should not be what I am. We changed things. I no longer fit the story that was written for me. I mean to harness the correction, rewrite the narrative, rather than the character. The ritual will need 3 further things. Something of myself, something offered by a weighty presence in this world. That's you, if you're willing. And something of my maker. That's me, but it's also him. He won't be easy to convince. You might have to take it from him. What would suffice? Something symbolic of my recreation." The last box is packed, and the unfinished begin to move out, hauling them to street level. "I will prepare things in the marshes. We must move soon. It will not be long before the correction comes for me." So we can grab a box and help. You're part of this now. You'll help the correspondent see things through. Or we can agree deceptively. You'll help the Clay Correspondent with the ritual. as soon as you've tipped off the engineer about what's happening. So the real question is, who do I want to side with? The clay man or the engineer? I think I shall help the clay man. Let's grab a box and help. The Clay Correspondent smiles. Thank you. We need to see this through. Stop the correction. Make sure no one else gets hurt because of me. Whatever it takes. Something is coming. No token offerings. There's no pomp or ceremony to your meeting with the elevated engineer this time. Instead of the Spire apartment, he receives you in a nondescript building in Watchmaker's Hill. He has a huddle of steely-eyed staff on hand and some kind of containment area for the correction, wreathed in looping copper cagework. Gone is the engineer's utter self-confidence. His tone is serious, almost dour, though his voice is steady. He paces the room, checks the containment cage one more time. Standing on the verge of something great like this, I find myself reflective. I seek to transcend the few limits that remain for me. He wants to throw it all away on a misguided guilt. What about you? Why involve yourself at all? So we can say they're clearly fools in love. The Clay Correspondent and the elevated engineer clearly need all the help they can get, if they're as blind to everything else as they are to their own burning need. The reward? The engineer did promise a reward, didn't he? Or we can say we're helping someone fulfill their ambition. The elevated engineer has a lofty, impossible dream. You have a soft spot for that sort of thing. He's around ambition. This isn't just their problem. The correction has a propensity for causing massive collateral damage. If the rivalry between the correspondent and the engineer continues as it has, more people are going to get hurt. Let's say they're clearly fools in love. The engineer snorts. It takes him a second to find a suitable retort. Don't waste my time with trifles now. His hand clutches at something beneath his shirt. Don't get me wrong. It was nice while it lasted, but I've made my choice, and I'd make it again. In fact, tonight, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Embers still remember how to burn? So, he says, what happens now? Well, I need a token. You need a token that connects the engineer to the correspondent to form part of the working. Of course, he says. He walks over to a cabinet and makes a great production of rummaging in the drawers. I expect he thought it would take some great act of persuasion or perhaps larceny. I'm all too happy to part with it. How else am I going to secure my prize? He hands you a piece of cracked crystal threaded on a thin silver chain. It's warm to the touch, but that has nothing to do with the work of red science. The engineer has missed reclosing one of the buttons on his shirt. All clay men have one, you know. Well, almost all. His heart is metal now. Meteoric iron I had brought down from the surface. It suits him better. A fragment of cracked crystal, devoid of light. Well, he says, the moment of truth, are you going to tell me where he plans to make his stand, or do I have to find that out for myself? He holds up a hand before you can speak. Remember what is at stake here. If the correction destroys him, it will turn its attention elsewhere. Right now, it's predictable, exploitable. We cannot rely on that to last. So we can tell him the location of the working. The correspondent plans to destroy the correction at a particular spot in Bugsby's Marsh. Or we can warn him to stay away. It's not as though he'll listen, but you'll make your feelings known. Or I can call him a fool again. Is he really this delusional? Can the two of them not just stop for a minute? Let's call him a fool again. The Clay Correspondent and the elevated engineer had a romance written in fire. They were everything to one another, at least for a while. They needed each other, and for all their lofty claims of ascension and self-sacrifice, that need hasn't magically gone away just because they had a falling out. Is the engineer really such a fool that he'd throw that away in pursuit of a mad dream? The engineer looks ready to launch into a fiery tirade, perhaps literally, given his capabilities, but he deflates, anger punctured, and slumps into a chair. Things can't be like they were. He has no shell. He feels everything so much. He needs protecting from the world, and I am not a protector. My path lies elsewhere. He looks at his awkwardly hovering staff, his meticulously prepared experiment area. Go, do what you must. I will follow the path I have spent so long laying for myself. Oh, now it's the matter of lead. You have the elevated engineer's token, a crystal sherd from the Clay Correspondent, before he was remade. You know the spot. The correction will manifest again soon, and means to destroy the correspondent. He intends to ensure that this will be its final manifestation. Let's approach the ritual site. The correspondent will enact his plan at the very place he was remade. He will not be able to return until the working is concluded. Ooh. This seems slightly terrifying, doesn't it? A lead-lined pit in the marshes. A depression in the ground, deep in the marshes. The smell of burning, not fresh, but so deeply infused that it has never faded. This hollow is a years-old wound in the world. The correspondent has packed that wound with lead. Here, the two of you may contain the correction. Here, you will seek to quench its fire. The Clay Correspondent looks up from affixing the last of the lead panels as you descend into the pit. He smiles, but it's a fleeting, skittish thing. Do you have it? Offer the cracked sherd, a piece of himself as he was. A symbol of what? Memory? Legacy? Continuity, he says, inspecting the herd. He kept this all this time. He can't disguise the smile or the spring in his step as he moves to affix it to one wall. He has already deployed a set of tools, including a bellows-fed forge. The Clay Correspondent is building a provenance for himself. What can you provide to legitimize his claim to life? The recognition of an eminent presence? Your regard has an outsized weight in this world. Bring that regard to bear for the correspondent, a letter of recommendation, because we are a person of some importance. An account of their love. A story is the first step to writing a reality. Set down their story, to stand for the correspondent's belonging. Gonna take fetching love stories? A deflection of the blame? The Clay Correspondent's existence may be an anomaly. That's not actually his fault. Let the blame lie where it should. Or the simple, honest recognition of another being. What more is needed than to be known? Or a certificate of authenticity. Not everything underneath that is a person has a birth certificate, but everything that does is a person, at least in the eyes of the law. I don't have Mithra to see right now, so let's go with an account of their love. Stories carry a lot of weight in the world. Stories remind us who we were. They let us imagine who we want to be. And the stories we tell about ourselves, especially to ourselves, are what make us who we are. If you want the world to know you, tell it a story. Once upon a time, there were two men. They were quite unlike, but each had something the other needed. They changed one another, in ways they wanted and in ways they didn't. They grew together, then apart. The Clay Correspondent takes the sheaf of papers from you with a curious expression. The story doesn't have an ending yet, but the story belongs in the world. We need one final piece. He takes a scalpel and makes a deep incision in his chest. He molds open a hole and reaches through, worming his hands in deep until they expose a lump of black iron. The chisel, quickly please. Only take a sliver, says the correspondent, straining to keep the wound open. A piece of who I have become. You set the chisel against the Clay Correspondent's heart, a lump of meteoric metal. 2 quick strikes. He groans in pain, but stands firm. And you hold up a piece between your fingers. I am, says the correspondent as he takes it. I am. The correspondent takes up the heated steel stylus. I need to finish inscribing the required sigils. He gestures at the pit's lead walls. If he intends to fill this whole canvas, then rather a lot of inscription will be needed. Then all we need to do is wait for the correction to manifest. When it does, I'll make my final mark upon the... I guess you could call it a testament. It will witness that all is made right, and it will be done. It will be over. Well, let's commence the work. There are enough tools for 2, and with you helping, the work will go twice as fast. The stylus is hot in your hands. The marks flow as easily as sweat. The pit is warm, the heat of the forge reflecting off the lead panels. The correspondent works quickly and with great precision, but there is a great deal to be done before the correction arrives. A fraction of the pit's walls bear the necessary marks. Tension radiates off the correspondent, and the heat is becoming unbearable. Even his soft clay skin sweats, a milky, brisk-coloured fluid. Oh well, let's keep at it. There's much to do, and an uncertain amount of time. The bellows pump. Hot steel inscribes lead. The heat rises. The ritual begins. Let's keep at it again. It's here. A wash of heat drenches the pit as above a false sun enkindles, the blinding, unflinching light of suspended judgment. There is nowhere to hide. The correction descends. At your side, the Clay Correspondent gasps. There's still time. We have to keep going. We have to press on. You must see if a reckoning can be postponed a little longer. The correction's fire floods the pit. The correspondent steps in front to shield you. He bears the worst of it. His skin marbles and vitrifies under the heat. You're trapped down here until it's done. The only way out is through. Coordinating your actions with the Clay Correspondent may improve your chances. Pay attention to what he intends. Ow, my wounds are very high. The Clay Correspondent is trying to keep his distance from the correction and lay down a few speedy sigils. But does he really propose to mark the whole of this pit? There is so much still to do. Here and there, patches of lead threaten to melt. You must raise the progress of a great working to 8. The correction seeks to destroy the Clay Correspondent. Do what you can, and accept that it may not be enough. So we can furiously mark the walls. The correction has heated the steel to inscribing temperature. How convenient. Do what you can to progress the ritual. This will gain more progress, but you will take wounds, and I don't think I can actually afford to take any wounds. We got a little bit of wiggle room. It can go to 8 before it's a problem. Well, 8 is a problem. We can follow the Clay Correspondent's directions. He has the whole working arrayed in his head. He can tell you which marks to make where. You'll gain some progress, but without help, it may hurt. You can draw the correction's attention. Take the heat off the correspondent. Metaphorically speaking, at least. This will reduce whatever harm the correspondent would take. He will not contribute to the ritual, but he still make progress. Or we could just attack it head on if I had better wounds, but I do not. I am too badly hurt. Right, let's see if how much Following his directions will help me. Ouch. That which is now and always has been. He points at a panel, ignoring the corrections charge as he lays in his own. Then copy the marks from 2 panels over. Do we try furiously marking the walls? Let's try it. How badly can this go? Ow. You carve flaming marks into lead, heated by the correction's own fire. The steel is almost too hot to hold. Your fingers blister, the smell of roasting meat choking you. Do we try again? Let's try again. You carve flaming marks into the lead, heated by the correction's own fire. Okay, so our wounds are getting quite high right now. Uh-oh. The lead walls of the pit are bright with correspondence marks, bathed in the light of the correction's flames. We can do it, the Clay Correspondent's voice is strained. His body is a messy patchwork of clay and glass. Flash fired by his near misses with the correction. He is stiff and slowing, but determined. We can finish it. The correction blurs forward again. The correspondent tries to move aside, but the glass, threading through his leg, breaks into a lattice work of cracks. You can call out a warning. There's nothing more you can do. The correspondent gasps out a word, a flaming utterance that throws you and the correction back. Gasps. His cheek is stiff with glass. Still time, he says, through a mouth that can barely open. A section of the lead panels slags and falls away as the metal finally succumbs to the searing heat. If it comes to it, I can end it quickly. Okay, we're back here again. Let's furiously mark the walls again and see if we die. Hopefully not. This is awfully dangerous right now. Let's try one more time. Cross your fingers. Oh, he kept it off my back. So he took wounds. He took a large amount of wounds, but I didn't get hurt. One last time. Oh, I have to raise it to 8. We might be in trouble. I don't think either one of us is going to die. Either the clay man or me is definitely going to die. Okay, that time we took damage. The correspondent's legs are 2 uncooperative pillars of glass. His fingers have lost their nimbleness, and the marks come slower. Still, he shakes his head. No more time. I won't let it. He looks at you, his eyes suddenly calm. Run. I can still destroy it. I can end it with fire. There's a sound from the rim of the pit. The impossibly nonchalant sound of someone clearing their throat. Let's look up. Things certainly can't get any worse. Ahem, says the elevated engineer. He smiles with a fiery smugness that eclipses even the correction. Well, well, what a mess you've got yourselves in. Good thing I happen to be passing, eh? He strips off his jacket. Now the real work begins. The elevated engineer produces a charged copper stylus of his own and begins laying down correspondence marks. He looks supremely smug despite the heat flames. The Clay Correspondent is going to inscribe marks of correspondence. The correction's blazing attacks be damned. You're getting there. You might actually be able to do this. Let's coordinate our efforts. Things are desperate, but there are 3 of you now. The Clay Correspondent and the elevated engineer fall into a familiar routine. Each knows exactly what the other is going to do, and positions themselves accordingly. In spite of everything, they can barely disguise their smiles, the joy at working together once more. Coordinate our efforts again. It comes to an end. Bring about inevitable conclusions. The Clay Correspondent points at the clay sherd pinned to the wall. His glassy fingers no longer separate. There, you can finish it. The correction stalks toward the correspondent. He can barely move. He doesn't have long. One more mark, he says. That's all it needs. Wait, says the engineer. All I need is a moment. I can contain the entity without destroying it. So we can destroy the correction, finish the ritual, expunge the correction, save the Clay Correspondent. We can step aside, let the elevated engineer repurpose the ritual, bind the correction. Perhaps the correspondent will survive. Let's save the Clay Correspondent. You rush for the suspended sherd as the correction closes on the correspondent for the last time. No! Cries the engineer. You begin the final mark, the mark that will drive away the correction for good. But your hands can't sketch as fast as flame, and the correspondent is out of time. He screams. The sound of cracking splits the air as clay vitrifies and untempered glass fractures. He looks out, eyes scared, desperate, past the correction, to where the engineer stands open-mouthed and powerless. The correspondent draws in one more breath and utters a muted word of correspondence. The breath is knocked out of you. You are suddenly cold. Freezing, actually. Frost rinds the walls of the pit. Breath fogs the air. The correction is gone. Banished. But not destroyed. The Clay Correspondent, and he can still be called that, just is on his knees, with the elevated engineer supporting him. I'm sorry, says the correspondent. He's talking to you. If I'd let it take me, you could have finished it. But you... I want more time. We deserve more time. He can't look at the engineer in the face. I was weak. I'm so... The engineer wraps him in his arms. Never apologize, he says fiercely. Never. His voice cracks, and so they just hold each other, in silence. You make yourself scarce. I need a moment alone, and you need to be away from this damned pit. Let's go. There's nothing more to be done for now. Marsh water cools you as you trudge home. A bath, then a nice cold cup of tea. It takes time for things to settle. Smoke rises from the marshes the next few days. No word from the engineer or the correspondent until a hastily scrawled note. The epilogue. The elevated engineer's bizarre spire apartment is a little less orderly than before. Old furniture has been dragged out from storage, pieces designed to accommodate the weight of a clayman. As you enter, the Clay Correspondent hobbles over. He moves stiffly, much of his body rendered cold, unflexing glass. But his expression is warm, and he touches you delicately on the shoulder. Welcome, friend, he says. I'm glad you came. Let's take tea with the engineer and the correspondent. You've all certainly earned it. The engineer seems a little lost. Domestic bliss sits awkwardly with his demeanour. His smiles are brittle, but still genuine. There is much to do, he says. It'll be years yet, but the correction will return. Correspondent's expression sours. And we will be ready for it, the engineer assures him. Together we are irrefutable. And what of his great ambitions? One of those tangible smiles comes to the fore. Ascension and weight. The engineer excuses himself, retreating to his workshop, leaving you and the correspondent alone. He's still adjusting. It can be a tricky thing, getting what you want. The correspondent makes as if to stand, then thinks better of it. I suppose I must adjust too. And was it worth it? The correspondent turns to the great window. Below, London sprawls. The still, soft parts of his face crease into a smile. I am right where I belong. At last. And this concludes the exceptional story, Flame, Lead, Clay, Glass. That was a very well written and interesting story. I enjoyed every second of it. I hope you also enjoyed it just as much. Thank you all very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, let me know what you think. Your comments are greatly appreciated. Thank you again to the members of the channel. Your support means the world to me and it really does help keep these videos coming. But as always, I'll see you next time.